What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to be doing my reaction and recap of 2025 Powerlifting America Nationals. As all of you probably know, I have not addressed my nationals performance publicly because I have been off of social media for the past couple of months. And while I am going to stay pretty restricted in my social media usage going forward, basically relegating it just to professional stuff, I did want to take the time to go over my performance because a lot of you are wondering, and obviously it was my best performance to date, so I think that it's worth discussing. So before we get into all the attempts, I am going to do like a live reaction, kind of watching through everything and walking you through how I was feeling on the day, our thought process coming into it with me and Marcellus. Before I get into all of that, I will just do sort of a general recap. So I took fourth place with an 857.5 kilo total. I went 8 for 9 in this performance. And I think overall, just general thoughts before we get into the specifics, I'm pretty pleased with my performance. It was one where, I think a lot of people kind of expect that, oh, Sean is going to like have a really good local meet at some point during the year, kind of like he usually does. And then he's going to show up to nationals and just miss lifts. And it's just going to be clear that he is not capable of performing at the biggest stage. And I think that this meet proved that that's not the case. And I think that there was a lot of just technical refinement that really allowed this to be the case. I think that a lot of people have assumed over the years that it's this psychological inability to perform at the highest level, but I really do think it's just been a physical thing. I think that it has been an issue over the years of just really bad technique that has made performing more unpredictable. It hasn't been uncommon in the past couple of years for me to miss 1 or 2 squats on the national level and then bench with my, soft touch technique. If I were subject to stricter commands, that could be a problem. Depending on how uneven my touch was at the chest, if you guys think back to nationals in Vegas, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. There are just a lot of these sort of technical issues that I needed to iron out, and I think over the past year and change in working with Marcellus, it's not necessarily been anything explicit that him and I have talked about. It's more so just been, listen, if you want to be good, this has to be addressed. And I think that I kind of knew that coming out of Memphis Nationals, that something significant needed to change. So getting all of that out of the way, I'm confident going forward that it really is just a matter of executing lifts and, with my technique feeling sharp and mentally just feeling confident, both in myself as well as in, Marcellus to make the right calls. I think that you guys will see really, really strong performances out of me going forward. In terms of how I feel, just general sentiments about the competition, on one hand, like I said, I'm pleased with my performance and my execution, but at the same time, I'm leaving very frustrated and very invigorated because, in years prior, when the landscape of the class really was just like Russ is at the top, and then I'm either right there with him or closely behind, the narrative was always just that Russ is going to make lifts because that's what he does, and Sean is going to miss lifts. And this time around, all credit to Joe Borenstein, an absolutely phenomenal performance. I was just outclassed. And I think that's a situation that doesn't sit right with me, right? To truly just be beaten, like talent. I could have had the best day I could have possibly asked for, and it wouldn't have been enough, right? So that's something where coming out of this meet, I'm like, I need to continue to level up in the way that I have over this past year. So before we watch the videos, I know that I'm doing a lot of sort of preambles here, but let's talk about what the plan was coming in. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna put up on the screen the last heavy lifts of prep. So at about 4 weeks out, which is typically when, with how Marcellus programs, the heaviest lifts are usually coming the block out. The heaviest squat that I took was a 305 kilo squat, which I will put up on the screen here. This moved phenomenally. Like the last time that I had ever taken 305 was last summer before I had left for my Italy trip, and it was an all-out grind. So to be able to smoke it in the way that I did here was just further confirmation of what all of training had been telling me, which was that I was due for a very, very big squat. Finished prep with a 215 kilo bench press, which I will also put up. And this was a week out. And then similarly a week out, I had finished with a 340 kilo deadlift, which was the heaviest week 3 that I'd ever taken, and the heaviest pull that I had taken the heaviest lift I had ever taken leading into a competition. I had never loaded anything more than this successfully in training. And this bodes really well because my deadlift always sees a big taper. Meet day always is the best deadlift ever feels. So to see deadlift perform the way that it did in training was a really, really hopeful sign for competition day. Now, for those of you who maybe weren't in the know, leading into this competition, Marcellus and I had actually decided to go to 3 days a week of deadlifting, which is a very uncommon strategy, but one that we felt was both necessary and one that we felt that I could handle. Maybe a bit uncommon for people, but I actually am pretty tolerant of hinge pattern movements. So to give you guys an idea, I'm usually now deadlifting sumo 3 days a week. On one of those days, I have a belt squat RDL, and on a separate 4th day, I have a lighter stiff leg RDL or stiff leg deadlift. And this is a pattern or set of patterns that my body just tolerates very well. It doesn't usually beat me up very much. Where on the other hand, squatting actually does a number on me to the point where obviously now I'm only doing 2 days of low bar and then I have my 1 day of high bar. So that's kind of setting the stage for things, right? These were the lifts that I had taken coming into competition. And then what follows from that is the attempt selection. So Marcellus and I had come up with an attempt selection plan, which I will also put up on the screen, where we would open squat at 275 kilos. We would plan to jump to 295 kilos. And then the low end on squat would be about 305. And then the high end on squat would be about 310. Bench press, we would open up around 197.5 kilos. We would plan to jump anywhere from 208, which was the record, up to 210 kilos. And then from there, it would be open-ended of 210 up to 215 kilos, and whatever analogous chip could be loaded on the bar for the record, because obviously having a chip when you're in contention for a podium spot or a win, that's very valuable. Then deadlift, we would open around 315 kilos, jump to about 340 kilos, and then from there, it would be anywhere as low as 350 kilos all the way up to 360 kilos, we felt was kind of the reasonable range there. So without exhausting all of the nitty-gritty details, let's just get into the meat footage, and I'll kind of pause and stop to give you guys my reflections as we're working through it. So let's get started.
Throughout, but it definitely looked, like you said, a little bit of work, more so than you'd want for an opener.
Sean Noriega, wily veteran of the game. I remember Sean back in 2017 at the Junior World Championships. Yeah. Sean went through a period where he had regressed on the total and fell back, and making a huge comeback earlier this year, hitting 850 and reminding everybody he's a threat. Will the comeback story continue? Oh, wow.
Okay, so that 275 kilo opener was smoked. And the thing about this meet, and I think most people can kind of resonate with this, unless you're truly like a squat specialist, is that because it is the first lift of the meet, it usually is the most nerve-wracking. I can honestly say that squat, in spite of being such a weak point for me over the years, I was the most confident in this lift. And there are a couple reasons for this. So the first thing is that, like I said, the technical aspect of my squat where basically now I take a very minimal brace. I don't hold my breath very long. Controlling heavy weight has gotten much easier. So like if you look back in previous years, you see a lot of shaking on the way down and a lot of instability. A lot of that was likely caused by stance width and just like aggressively bracing. I would say primarily that, where this very ab heavy, holding the breath long, would make it very difficult to stabilize the whip of the bar when it got significantly heavy. And that would usually happen right around 600. So you're basically screwed from like opener on. So eliminating that has been huge. Like it doesn't feel difficult at all to control really heavy weight into the bottom. So that's one element of confidence. The second is that squat has by far been the most consistent lift for me over the past year. There's never really been a primary day that went unexpectedly poorly. It just, as we made our way through a block, every week 2 would feel better than week 1, every week 3 better than week 2, every week 4 better than week 3. And consistently, the increase in performance across blocks was the same. Meaning that if I felt good for, 640 on a week 3, I knew that I'd be good for 670, let's say, on a week 4. And that was consistent across blocks. So I knew what to expect week to week in terms of jumps. And because with how training has been structured, of basically training into the comp, there was no like big fatigue debt and big taper to feel like you had to rely on to get this desired result. It was just every week 4 felt the best of all the weeks in the block. Every week 4 of every preceding block was really strong. So there was no guesswork, there was no uncertainty, there was no crossing of the fingers, just hoping you'd showed up oh my goodness, hoping that you would show up strong. You just knew that that was going to be the case. So there was full confidence in that, and I think it showed on that opener. I mean, warming up, I felt super strong. The cut was not a factor at all. I weighed in around 82.9, cut from about 86. Very, very easy cut, recomped well. I think I was about 88 and a half kilos by the time I was squatting. I've gotten really good at recomping, so that's good. Let's move on to the next one.
Experienced lifters that keep an eye out.
There's my buddy Brandon Rojo as one of the technical coordinators. So this is 650 pounds for a second attempt. And like I said, full confidence that this was going to be smoked, especially based on the opener, based on training. But this was only 5 kilos below, at this point, my meet PR, which I hit 300 kilos back in December, which prior to that, I had only squatted 295 in comp since then. Since March 2019, I had not hit a squat PR. So March 2019 to December 2024, no squat PR. In fact, didn't even match that 295 in comp at any point. So I had regressed in squat PR or in squat performance on meet day for about 5 years. So to be loading my previous best as well as 5 kilos under my best is just, having the confidence to do that and know that that's what was going to happen was like incredibly invigorating.
Intimidated.
And like Ryan said, he said, doesn't look intimidated. I mean, I knew that I was going to crush this squat.
These lifters are pulling punches. They are all getting close and maybe even beyond their PRs in their second attempts. Even Sean here, just 5 kilos below his best of 300.
Oh my goodness. And it looks like he's got a lot more than 300 today. And Sean's previous PR, again, landed him with 850.
So, 650 flew. I knew strength-wise that I was good for 310 after this, which would be 5 kilos over what I've ever squatted. It would have been a 5 kilo, it would have been a 10 kilo meet PR. I knew strength-wise I was good for 310. But I didn't verbalize that to Marcellus because something that you're gonna see on the third attempt, I felt on the second attempt. So I think what ended up happening, and this is kind of interesting, is that I think the floor that I squat on at my gym is crooked. And I think what's happened over time is that because I consistently squat in that same rack, my body's gotten adjusted to the crookedness or the slantedness of the floor. And what I was feeling on meet day was like the bar was pulling me to the left side, because obviously the floor is level on meet day. And I felt that I was not in as much command of the weight as I could have been, even though I felt really strong. So I told Marcellus, load what you think I have. And I think he kind of picked up on something being a little off, but he couldn't quite put his finger on what it actually was until him and I had the discussion I'm having with you now, and he went back and watched video from the front. He's like, oh, okay, I see what you're talking about. So as I'm walking to the bathroom after my second attempt, I open up lifting cast and I'm like, I know I can do 310, but Marcellus, like, please tell me you load at 307. And I see my third attempt column populate and it's 307.5. And I'm like, yes, okay, that is gonna be the perfect number. So like I said, all confidence in this plan. I'm feeling great, moving great. Like that second attempt, I felt very numb. I think some of you maybe can relate to this, where it's like you can take a heavy lift and you feel the aftermath of it. Like you can feel the fatigue, you can feel yourself coming down from that adrenaline, but it didn't even feel like I had done a lift. Like I truly did not feel like I had taken any attempts. So I knew that the power, the ability to exert myself was all going to be there by the time we got to the third attempt.
It's height, but you're right. At a certain point,
So here we go, 307.5 kilos.
Regained 307 and a half for the comebacking Sean Noriega. Sean, crazy to think he's still in his 20s, still a young...
Imagine I winked at the camera and then got stapled.
And he's such a wily veteran.
Yeah, and that 295, which was just 5 kilos below his PR, obviously above it now by 7.5, was so speedy.
7.5 kilos over his previous personal best, and his previous personal best attributed to 850. Where is it going to end up today? Oh my goodness, Sean is on fire today. Huge, huge squat session for Sean Noriega. Look at him.
Okay, this is my favorite lift I've ever done in competition. This squat was the individual highlight of my competition career. Because like I said before, I had been a really good squatter relative to the field for most of my early years of competing in this sport. Like when I first got into powerlifting, I was kind of a natural squatter, and deadlift was kind of secondary to that. Back in 2018, I had squatted 290 in comp, and I think Russ had squatted 301, it was like something, a chip in the low 300s, which at the time was a record. And I was closing that gap for a bit. And then I went through that period following the 295 I hit at the Arnold of just regression, stagnation, inconsistency for 5 years. I mean, that's a long time to go without a PR. Well, my other two lifts were doing really well. So like I said, for me to, on the biggest stage where I've traditionally, at the very best, underperformed on squat, and at the very worst, just missed multiple squats, to go 3 for 3, to put 7.5 kilos on my squat in 4 months after putting 5 on in 5 years, easily my favorite lift I've done in comp. But you'll see exactly what I was talking about, which is that if we go back and watch the attempt, right, you notice...
Was so speedy.
7.5 kilos over his previous personal best, and his previous personal best attributed to 850. Oh my goodness, Sean is on fire.
You'll notice there's that shift into the left leg, and the bar is kind of drifting down on that left side. So I think that was the perfect call. So at this point, what's kind of going through my head is like, okay, if we can bench what we did in training, which honestly has been a very consistent trend for me with bench over the past couple of years. Typically you would think like, okay, you know, you go from training to the platform with a cut, with commands, usually kind of underperform a bit. But in all honesty, with the programming and peaking that we've kind of come to with bench, it's actually been pretty easy to feel as good on the day bench-wise, as good on the day for bench as I would in training. So I felt as though, okay, we can hit the bench that we want, and we can hit the deadlift that we want. We're still in contention, assuming that, you know, this now forces Joe to load something. So like I said, we're shooting for that like 880 range. That's kind of the goal here. What surprised me the most about squats was Taylor's performance. Granted, Taylor keeps a lot of things close to the vest, but we did not expect him to squat 317. We were thinking somewhere maybe like 310 tops. So to see a 317 squat out of Taylor was very surprising. I didn't necessarily consider, you know, that he was going to be like a shoe-in for second, but I knew he was going to be a contender within the top three. And then from our perspective, after Delaney had missed his third squat of 320, that would kind of be it for him. Like he would be fighting for that third place spot, but that would really be the top end for him. And likely was going to be just off the podium. For us, we were like, okay, well, we still have a shot at first. Second place is kind of like the primary, like let's just secure that. And then obviously third place is, you know, not at all what you're shooting for. So let's move on to bench press.
Confidence moving forward.
Whenever you have these high pressure meets and you come in and you start missing lifts, it's very easy to take yourself out of the meet. So once again, you just gotta gain that momentum coming back with getting some of these lifts in.
Like you said, Ryan, this is going to be an interesting one, and he seems very hyped up for it. Probably some nerves in there as well.
A little bit of nerves, 197.5 for Sean Noriega, looking at a fantastic squat session. The strength is there. He's just got to meet the technical requirements, but if he does, he's on his way to building a monster total.
Yeah, his name is definitely in the hat. Should bench not cause him any issues. Our eyes are on the elbows. Strong?
That looks good.
That looks good. Okay. So bench opener, 197.5 kilos, pretty much moved as well as we could have asked for. It felt very strong. But the thing that we ran into, or I can't even say we ran into, because in reality, this is something that should have been really solidified before we got to the platform. But my butt was coming up. My butt was coming up in the warm-up room from 1 red on. And this is an issue I had when I used to soft touch, but obviously with the leg drive, it will be down and then it'll come up, right? So in the past, when I used to soft touch, it's like you knew it was an issue from the very beginning, meaning that like once you're in your setup, it's either gonna be up or down. But in this case, I would feel like it was down, and then once I applied the leg drive, the left butt cheek would come up. Not the right one, but just the left one. And knowing that from the warm-up room, we had to say, you know what, like we have to adapt. Let's just not push with our legs as hard and try to arch harder. So let's just rely a little bit more on extension, not using the legs as aggressively, and see what we can do. So that opener moved really well, but we didn't feel the confidence to jump straight to like a 210 or one of, you know, a 210.5 or anything like that, because sure, you can kind of muscle through some of the lighter weights, but once it starts to get toward the top end is when you lose it even slightly, or you can't use your legs as much. You might just miss, right? You might have this like sort of 1 for 3 day after an opener that actually moved very well. So we ended up going to 208, which for the time being would give us the record, which we'll take a look at now and see how that moved.
Sean had a fantastic squat event, and while some of the members at the top end of the 83s have missed, Sean has not.
All he has to do is replicate what he did on that opening attempt. Try not to think too much and just replicate, once again, what you did on that opener, just to make sure that you're able to kind of carry that momentum.
If his deadlift has improved like his squat, I shudder to think.
That's a little tougher, as expected. Is it a new national record?
So 208 kilos, good lift. And this is kind of what I was talking about, which was that I was so afraid of my butt coming up that I have to not push with my legs as hard. And in reality, it ended up staying down convincingly so. And maybe I could have pushed harder with my legs, but you never know, right? You have to adapt. And adapting just cost me a couple kilos. So the opener moved really well, but obviously, as you guys could see, 208 got very sticky. Now, from here, I come off of the platform and Marcellus asks me, he's like, do you want 212 or do you want to just play it safe? And I think had I known, and again, hindsight is 2020, I think had I known how tight the finish was going to be, I would have said to just load 212. And the reason I say that is with this technique, I have gotten incredible at grinding heavy weights. I have taken a lot of true RPE 10s in training while sinking. And just based on how the 208 moves, if I think back to training when maybe I would have jumped from 205 up to 215 or 207 to 212 or any of those kind of similar jumps, that's about how it would move. And I would hit that next attempt. So the one regret I honestly have from this competition was telling Marcellus just to load 210. Because as you guys are about to see, it moves very difficult, but I am almost certain that had we loaded 212, I would have been able to hit it as well. I'll put up on the screen, I had taken 217, a block out, as like my last heavy day of the week 4 of that penultimate block. And you'll kind of see what I'm talking about. Like once it gets off the chest, I've gotten so good at just being able to just press it out with the triceps. So really that is kind of my one regret of the meet, because those 2 kilos could have made, a pretty significant difference.
And the thing is with these 83s, a lot of them do have big pulls, big jumps. One miss changes a lot.
Sean briefly held that national record. Joey B took it from there.
Yeah, not looking to extend it. So if he gets this, of course, gains 2 kilos, loses the chip.
I think this is actually a good idea. 208 was tough. Another 2 kilos, it's not for nothing. He might need it if he wants a podium finish or even greater. Oh, he's strong from that position.
That seems like the right move, because 213 would have been the next jump he needs to make.
Yeah, so watching that, and then after having completed the lift in comp, I was obviously very excited to have hit it, because obviously being 6 for 6, while you have guys like Delaney having missed a 3rd squat, Angelo having missed 2 benches, you're like, all right, we made a good call and we're well on our way. Like we just got to keep making lifts, and obviously that puts a lot of pressure on people on both sides of where you're placing. But yeah, after watching that, I was like, we had the jump up. We definitely had the 212, the 213, or I guess the 212.5. So yeah, very frustrating, but can't change anything. Obviously was the right call in the moment. Okay, so moving on into deadlift. Now, we're looking at the board, and obviously based on forecasted totals of openers, Joe has now run away with it. And I think he made a ballsy move, which I'll talk about in a second, but I think he made a very smart move in upping his opener. So I was warming up on the platform behind Joe, and I noticed 330 get loaded in the warm-up room, or I guess, 330 being loaded in the warm-up room, which originally was his opener. So when we saw that, we knew, okay, he's going to take his planned opener in the warm-up room and then up his opener to his planned second. And I think that was a really smart move, because basically this would put someone, whether it was me or Taylor, in a position to have to, in order to extend past what his total would be on his opener, we wouldn't be able to put that number on the bar until a 3rd deadlift. Maybe it wasn't top end for our 3rd deadlifts, but we wouldn't be able to even know or load a weight to put us at that total until we even got to the 3rd pull, right? The second attempts wouldn't quite get either of us there. So based on forecast, Joe was ahead, And then Taylor still had a pretty good chunk on top of where I was at, but we felt confident we could outpull Taylor. So we felt confident that we would put ourselves in a position where, you know, even if based on forecasted after openers, even forecasted after seconds, Taylor was ahead, that we were just the stronger deadlifter, which I do believe was still the case for the day, which, you know, you guys will see how deadlifts moved in a second. But I do believe that top end strength, that I was the stronger deadlifter on the day. Obviously, we'll get into what happens on the third attempt. But we at least felt okay. We're in a spot where second is still a very real opportunity that we are going to fight for. But of course, with Delaney on our heels, that's something that we're going to have to play to as well. And if we end up in a situation where, you know, second is out of reach, or, you know, we aren't feeling as strong as we thought we could, and we need to just pull for third, then so be it. But like I said, according to our plan, we were opening 315 kilos. And just as in typical meet day fashion, deadlifts felt unbelievable. And we actually dropped a warm-up from our warm-up plan because things were just feeling so good. So the plan was to just go 2 reds, 3 reds, 4 reds, 255, 285, and then open at 315. But because of how effortless things were feeling, I told Marcellus, let's just go 2 reds, 3 reds, 4 reds, 5 reds, just leave it at that. I feel very good about just jumping from the 270 kilos to the 315. There's really no need for a warm-up in between. So, 315 kilos, we'll watch here right now.
Both in total and deadlift openers, comparatively, how this moves.
I did not notice that Call Me Maybe was playing. I'm just completely zoned in, tuning everything out.
Oh!
And it moves well.
Wow!
Like I said, meet day deadlifts are just a different animal for me entirely. You guys saw the 340 that I pulled to end prep. Granted, it was a week 3, under fatigue, blah, 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 but it's a night and day difference. I knew from the moment I pulled that opener that I was going to be in for the best deadlift day of my life, without question. It moved faster than Delaney's opener, which was what we expected, just given the kind of jumps that we take versus the kind of jumps that a lot of Joey's guys take. And even though Taylor does take very smart, measured jumps, we just knew that they were opening heavier relative to their max than we were. And I'll show you guys Taylor's deadlift opener just so you could see what I mean.
Question answered.
Hello!
And now, that begs the question of, is this the best we've ever seen Taylor?
Which is remarkable to say, he's arguably the greatest of our generation. If I'm honest, I don't even know if that's arguable. Wow, a lot more there.
Yeah, even with
So it moved really well. Obviously, we were watching that from back behind the curtain. But we definitely felt like we were the stronger deadlifter, which is, like I said, we expected to just be taking larger jumps. And while they would take bigger jumps, that we would end up just over and could potentially start jockeying for position. So as according to the plan, we jumped to 340 kilos for that second deadlift. And let's take a look at about how it moves.
He has a lot more where that came from.
to think we are in this second.
So you guys will notice Steve standing there. That's not just a coincidence. I had spoken to Steve prior to the meet and said, look, Marcellus is going to be handling Chris Perez. He's going to be handling Shun Jabril. He's going to be divided in attention amongst multiple people. While granted, obviously he's my coach and he's going to do everything that he can to handle me to the best of his ability. I told Steve, hey, if you have the time and you're willing, please help us, me and Marcellus, with doing the math and trying to plan attempts and make the right call for that third attempt. So that's why Steve is there.
And that was an 852.5 total over what the world record was last year. And we still have lifters to follow, looking for a bigger total in their second attempt.
Sean Noriega now, 340 kilos. Sean absolutely having the lifting day of his life.
The 315 was very convincing. No reason to think that this isn't a reasonable jump.
857.5 is what Sean will end up on if he gets this. Oh!
No if about it, Ryan.
Yo! This is such an amazing 83.
So, like I said, compare that 340 to the 340 in training. It's not even the same lift, right? And I think one of the things that Marcellus and I were concerned about coming into this meet was grip. Because prior to switching to 3 days a week of deadlift, my grip was consistently an issue, where I would just get above a certain threshold, and as soon as I broke the floor, I could feel my grip slipping. And once we switched to 3 days, that was a non-issue. In training, I could have held that 340 forever, and on the platform, even here on this day, I felt like my grip was limitless. I pulled 340, and I was like, this feels like nothing. I can hold it in my hands. It's not straining my grip. It's not slipping, nothing. So after taking this second attempt, I just told Marcellus, like, let's just wait and see. Let's wait and see what we have to load, whether it's, you know, in a situation where we're pulling for first, should Joe miss his second, or just trying to maximize placing. Let's see what we can do. Because what ended up happening with Joe, kind of like I had mentioned before, was that he had upped his opener and then jumped to the record and what I imagine was his planned third for his second. And the reason I said earlier that it was so ballsy is that this was truly top end for him. Like, he didn't have another 2.5 kilos in him. So had he missed, there's really no telling if he could have pulled it again. And that would have had him sitting at around 878. So with 878 being the total that he potentially would be stuck at, if he had priced himself out of a lower than 900 total, you know, we were going to, if it was in the cards, we were going to try to plan to pull for that. And I'm sure Taylor was thinking the same thing.
Historic moment, a 900 kilo total from an 83 kilo lifter, well above 10 times the body weight.
It's a new era.
And it's the era.
77, 900 kilo top.
So obviously blew that up, total 900 kilos, first place is locked up, out of the question, no one's touching that. So now our focus shifts. We're like, okay, what is Taylor doing next? What is Delaney doing next? Now, Delaney's second of 335 really didn't move all that well. Now, Delaney's kind of a slow deadlifter, kind of an interesting case where, you know, he can load 595 and it doesn't necessarily look that fast, but he pulls very smooth and he can kind of keep that going at much higher weights than the speed would sort of dictate. But he had pulled 335 and we're like, okay, he has 10 kilos left, maybe. They might load like 12, but that's probably top end, like somewhere in that 860 to 865 range is probably where he's going to finish. So now it's just all about jockeying for positioning. And originally, I believe we put in 360 kilos as my third attempt, which again, like I said, grip permitting, I think that was my top end for the day, just based on how everything was moving. So with 360 in, I believe that would have put us at, let me just do the math here. I think that would have put us at 877.5, which after Taylor's second deadlift of 342, I believe that put him at 876. So 876, 877.5. This is the kind of jockeying that we're going for, right? So with a pull that would have put us at 877.5, that's potentially higher than what Taylor could have hit. Does that put them in a position to pull for something safe? Does that make them overextend? What is it going to make them do exactly, right? So that's the game you're playing in jockeying for second place. And then for third place, we're thinking, okay, we're going to, we're going to defend against Delaney, where we think top end he has like 345 or so, right? But what ends up happening is obviously Taylor's chasing first. Taylor's like, we believe we have second locked up, we're chasing first place. So with them loading, I believe 367, which is 811 pounds, you have to now just start playing the game of what do you think you have, and obviously defending against Delaney. So Marcellus and Steve had asked me, like, what do you think you have top end? I said the 360. Eventually we see what Delaney is loading, and we're basically coming to the conclusion of, if Delaney misses, then you're solidified third. Let's go after Taylor. If Delaney makes, given that Taylor's not going to drop, it probably just makes sense to secure third place. And so let's go ahead and watch Delaney's third pull, which they had put in 350, which we kind of felt like there's no way he's going to hit this. Like, it's not any knock to him. It's just based on the speed of the day. With 335, we're like, there's probably not much more there.
Oh, a phenomenal final effort from Delaney Wallace. He is not done yet.
No, Delaney, 350, seizes the opportunity.
So 350 kilos for Delaney puts him at 867.5 kilos, which, like I said, we did not anticipate that. But now it's time to play ball. And from our perspective, we're like, 340 was demolished. If we only have to drop to 352, this is a sure bet. And that's the way that I felt. I obviously am feeling the nerves, the hype, the arousal from a third attempt deadlift on meet day, which is going to put us, granted, obviously Taylor and Joe are now above this, but basically put us at the total that Russ hit at Sheffield, which prior to Sheffield was just an unheard of total in this class. So there's a lot of hype, a lot of emotion, excitement going into this lift, but dropping down to 352, in our corner, we're like, we got this wrapped up. Like, let's just knock Delaney off. We have to total the 870 because Delaney weighed in lighter, so we couldn't tie him and win on body weight because obviously we were the heavier lifter. But based on 340, we're like, all right, this is smoke. Let's just go in and pull it. So here we go.
Podium. Finishing with an 870 total. He did make that drop that we anticipated. 12.5 kilos on top of that 340 isn't a huge ask. It's moving well.
So you hear, right? You hear the commentators saying that 12.5 on top of that 340 is not a huge ask. And like I said, that's the way that we felt. 340 moved so well. So at this point, I'm walking out. I took my deep breath. I composed myself before stepping in front of the bar. And I'm like, I got this.
Phenomenal day so far.
Sean will end up with an 870 total, which is monstrous. Oh, just that lockout. He was...
The thing that pains me the most about this lift is that every time I've ever missed on grip before, I can feel it going from the moment I break the floor. Like, for any of you who have dealt with grip issues, you know that feeling where you start to pull and immediately it feels like the bar wants to kind of roll out. I did not feel that on this pull. Like, there was no slowing down point. The bar was just on its way up the whole time. Mentally, I'm like, all right, like, we've got this. Like, as the lift is going on, I'm already sort of rejoicing that we've completed the lift. It's done.
Ever so close to that 870.
And that means Delaney stays on the podium, it seems.
Still has Angelo Fortino pulling. Nope.
No, it would be a huge ask.
Yeah.
That's as close as you can get and miss. Basically got 2 lockout and that right hand just started to go. Yeah, that was a heartbreaker, because there's nothing you can do about it. You know, it just that's how things shake out sometimes. But like, man, that was the strongest I've ever felt on the platform. That was the strongest I had ever felt on deadlift. And like I said, this was not the top end plan. This was just, let's secure third place, secure 870, secure an NAPF invite, you know, and then we'll get the chance to put up an even bigger total at NAPFs. So this lift cost a lot, and that sucks. So, yeah.
And that's fair enough.
Wow.
Taylor out with 367 and a half. This will give him 876.
History books.
I'm getting lost for words here.
367.5 to put the pressure on Borenstein for 901 total. Incredible. Can he do it?
Yeah, I mean, none of us thought that he was going to pull this. And like I said, we had to defend against Delaney, because Taylor being slotted to pull after us could have just worked his way down, right? So like, had we made, you know, 352 and put us at 870, you know, he was already at 876, so that didn't matter. And let's say we had gone for something more aggressive had Delaney missed. Let's say, you know, Delaney misses and we go for 360 and we get it, right? That would put us at 877. You know, Taylor would have basically been in a position to miss, and we may have beaten him, right? So that's like kind of the frustrating part, right? You think about how all the math could have shaken out, right? So Delaney misses, we go to 360, and granted, you know, I missed 352, so I'm not going to pull 360. But in the moment, it's like, okay, Delaney misses, we go 360, that gives us 877.5. Taylor can't now just jump 2.5 over his 342 to just edge out the 877 with an 878, because we're already past that load. Taylor would have to load, I can't remember lot numbers right now, but he would either have to load 360 or 362, which, based on the bar not moving at all on 367, I don't know that either of those would have come up, right? So that's the frustrating thing, is that, you know, there's an opportunity for much better placing, but this is how the sport shakes out. This is how things go, right? Hindsight's 20/20, number one. Number two, you have to earn it. If I couldn't hold 352, not going to hold 360. So going forward, the plan really is to, just going to stop recording here real quick.
Recording stopped.
The plan going forward here is actually to move my grip to the smooth, which kind of seems counterintuitive, but it's actually been working really well so far, because I think the issue that we're running into is my hand and my wrist running into my quad. It's not necessarily that I'm getting kind of that peeling opening of the hand that the quad does to some people, but it's more so the contact on the way up seems to be just kind of jarring the arm. And I think for whatever reason, that's causing a grip issue. It used to not be as much of an issue, but I think if I look back to, you know, like 2021, where, you know, my pull was in that like 330 range, and then maybe 2022 where it was like 335, I think my legs were just smaller, and it seems to make a difference. And now the clearance that I get at lockout with a narrower grip feels much smoother, and holding onto the bar in spite of being on the smooth doesn't seem to be an issue. But we're not at those top end weights just yet. As of this video coming out, I will have not yet gone over 700 in training, so we'll have to see what happens there. But future plans. So future plans, we're gonna be doing the SBD Austin meet in November. So this is basically the invite meet that SBD is hosting for all of the people who are not going to Worlds, either as primaries or as alternates. So I don't know the finalized roster yet, but like basically everyone you see who's placed like third, maybe down to like 5, or you know, some second place finishers in weight classes where the alternates might not be going. So you think of maybe like the 93s who aren't going to get an alternate spot, or you know, lifters like that. It's going to be a stacked meet. It's going to be the best of the best, excluding the people who are going to Worlds and then Sheffield. So that's going to be a really exciting one. As far as training goes going forward, our plans are basically to keep doing what we're doing. Obviously, in the aftermath of the stiff sleeves, we are going to have to switch back to the SBDs, which I have already done. It's going to take some adjustment period, but I don't think it's going to be disruptive in the grand scheme of things. I still do believe that we will be able to add to the already massive squat that we've been able to build over this past year. With bench press, the focus is just going to continue to be putting on more muscle. We have a good system in place for the bench programming, but we just need more tissue. And there's no telling how much you can actually put on while, you know, staying relatively at the same body weight. So I know that we probably will have plans of periods of cutting and then periods of gaining weight to see what we can extract from that and end up net positive by the time we get toward meet prep. And then for pulls, we're going to continue on the 3 days a week layout. It was so successful and didn't even go for that long. We basically had 7 weeks of doing it going into nationals, which paid massively. So having an entire year of doing it, I think, is going to really make a difference. But that's all for today's video, guys. I really, really appreciate you watching. I appreciate all of the support for this year's nationals. It truly was a performance that I can look back on, and I don't want to use the word proud of, because I can't say that I'm like proud of it, but it was well done. Like I will give myself a pat on the back for being locked in the entire prep, being locked in for the competition, for executing well. Like I did what I had to do, and I think that that's a huge step in the right direction. But obviously, like I said, being just like outclassed on meet day doesn't sit right with me, and I'm 100% certain that if we continue on this trajectory, we can reach that 900 threshold and maybe even beyond that. Because like I said, top end, I do believe that we were capable of going over 880, and we just need to keep chipping away at that. And in no time, we'll be back at the top again. So that's it for today's video, guys. Again, I appreciate you all watching, appreciate the support, and we'll see you in Austin. Take care.